So before we kick off, just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for coming this evening. Second tasting in New Zealand, second virtual wine tasting in New Zealand. My name's Mark. I'll be your host this evening. I'm the Australian wine buyer, T's colleague, and we will be tasting through some of the. So it's just a kind of small picture of the wine world that is within Australia. We wanted to pick some wines that were very, very different in style to the ones that you might be used to in New Zealand. And we wanted to pick wines that were really true to site and true to place. And in order to do that, we wanted to work closely with someone who, here in Australia, but now more and more in New Zealand, we've been working really closely with, Mr. Adam Barton from Atlas Wines, and he joins us today on this tasting.
Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thanks again just for making the effort to jump online and look through a few wines with us. I've been told not to try and be funny because I'm not. So I'll please sing out any questions as you go, and we'll get cracking. So I think, Mark, have you got that map?
Absolutely. So if you mind, I'll do just a quick intro of what we just to give you guys just a bit of a background, bit of a history on where we're going to be traveling to tonight. We've got some amazing imagery and Google Maps, interactive maps, and Adam's been really generous with his time and shown us pretty much exactly where each of his vineyards are. So but first of all, I thought I'd just give you guys a bit of a picture of a bit of the history. So this is an image that I always like showing people, especially people from overseas, when talking about Australia as a country. Obviously, a very diverse range of climates that you would find, and that's a real life image of Europe and how much of Europe would fit within Australia. So as you could see, north to south, a huge difference in climate between southern Greece and Sweden in the very obviously the temperatures are flipped, but this gives you a bit of an idea of how enormous Australia really is. But the next picture that I'll show you gives an indication of actually where wine regions are within Australia and how it really is just this kind of tiny band of, well, it's not that tiny really, let's be honest, but it is a relatively small band of climates that we can make wines in Australia. You'll see that the vast majority of regions hug the coastline, the cooler coastline. You'll see all across the edges. A few key areas that don't, like Rutherglen, Canberra, but Canberra especially, they use altitude. Clare Valley is a little bit inland, but that uses altitude to offset the warm climates. But you can see here, despite being such an enormous country, there's only a tiny, tiny little band of land mass that you would use for winemaking. Very, very difficult, very different, I should say, to in New Zealand, where you can make wine pretty much north to south. So the climate is perfect for it. So I thought I'd just give you a bit of an introduction to start that with, and then this is the more specific imagery of where we're going to be going today. So we're looking in the Clare Valley, and then we're going to go to the Barossa. So before I get started as well, sorry, I should have done this a little bit earlier. I need to introduce our other guests. I've introduced Adam, but I'd also like to introduce who I mentioned before, Tirangi, who's our buyer in New Zealand. Say good day, T.
Hey guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
And also, I'd like to introduce our guest from over the ditch. Over in England is Alistair Cooper, MW.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, over the ditch, the very long ditch.
Very, very big ditch.
No, great to be here with you guys again. Great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. And thank you for joining us, as you said, quite early in your morning, but a bit of Riesling will wake you up nicely.
Plan.
We also have several other, so I'll just go back to the image we've got here now. So we're talking about South Australia in this tasting today, and then very specifically the Clare Valley and then the Barossa Valley, you'll see in the maroon colour just there. So this is just a tiny little splinter of the Australian wine world. However, we think these are great representations of their region, of their climate, and obviously of the great varieties that we'll be trying. So I'm actually going to share my screen onto this Google map. And Adam, I'll get you to give a little bit of an introduction, if that's all right, to your winery. And then we're actually going to go on a little 3D map tour of the Clare Valley. So over to you, mate.
So yeah, Atlas Wines. Hello.
Hello.
Atlas, sorry, just screen's all jumping around. Yeah, so Atlas Wines, we started, we processed our first fruit in 2009. Prior to that, I was an employed winemaker, plying my trade for who'd ever employ me. But 2008 and 9 were our first finishes. So 2008, off of our own vineyard, which is exclusively now planted to Syrahs, and the Riesling we source from growers. But I guess the Atlas philosophy, as you'd probably gauge from the name, is about being true to site and provenance, without having generations of vineyard assets behind me to on which to lean. So we've been fairly resourceful in and I guess try and choose growers and sites where we can achieve long-term supply arrangements and produce the quality of wines that we choose to. Whilst our home is Clare, we never limited ourselves from a production point of view to Clare. We always thought that, if the right parcels of the right provenance popped up in other places, then we would always look at it and try and bring it in under the umbrella. However, just as a function of where we are, we just get to know Clare really, really well, and better every year. So I guess what we were trying to seek as as winemaking interest and folly by opening up other regions to our brand, we're largely not done. That said, we do a Chardonnay from the Adelaide Hills, and a Shiraz from the Barossa, but we've become really, really focused on Clare and the differences between sites, because they really are can be quite diverse. Whether it's north of Clare, where you can see our White Hut vineyard, very sort of shaly, bony ground, tough red ground, really big, intense reds. When I say big, they're probably more in the muscular vein than the I guess what you see in the Barossa, which is the big plump lush stuff, which I love as well, but that's very different. So that's what we get out of there, and then we probably track down towards Leasingham and Watervale as the map goes. So we source Riesling out of 3 vineyards in Watervale. The 2 at the bottom of the screen there, the Eaton Vineyard and the Gully View Vineyard, they're east-west planting on rich red Terra Rossa soil. Clearly not summer there.
Bloody opposite.
That's where we get our florals, our limes, our citrus, the real punch that we see in high quality Watervale Riesling that's showing great typicity. There's one other vineyard which which is, I guess, it's not really a secret, but it's the Southern Vineyard, which is located to the west, out the back of the Watervale Township. Like I mentioned to Mark yesterday, it's a little area known locally as the Wetback Passage. It's in quite a steep valley, Skilly Valley, and it just sees a lot less daylight hours. So it's later ripening, preserves acidity, and I guess the soil is friable black clays over with more slate content. So you see that more pebbly, pebbly acidity. It doesn't sound great, but that real freshness and zip, which brings that degree of acid line and really complements the fruit forwardness of the other two sites.
That's an incredible little. I'm just actually going to zoom out. Sorry to interrupt you, mate. I'm just going to zoom out to give everyone a picture of kind of where we are, so you can see the three vineyards together. So the Gully View vineyard is one that that I know very, very well. As soon as Adam said the Gully View vineyard, I was like, yeah, I know that quite well. There's two brothers that the Kerner brothers. If you may or may not have heard of them in New Zealand, funnily enough, Turangi and I were talking about them today, completely outside of this conversation. And they won Young Gun Winemaker of the Year last year. They've been doing some really, really interesting things, and their main source of fruit is from.
Well, hello.
Looks like we've lost Mark.
Well, I'll pick up. That's true. So Kerners do source fruit, but that's because their dad owns it, which you'd expect. So the Gully View Vineyard has been a large source of Riesling for small producers and corporates alike for many years. So some of the great, it's contributed to the Leo Buring's Lyonnais, to Lyonnais, to the old Richmond Grove Rieslings. Vickery pulls out of there at the moment. So look, it's of provenance, it's of quality. That said, for us, it doesn't give us, because of those reasons, the point of differentiation. It's if we're just setting out to try and produce, supermarket Watervale Riesling, then that's fine. Because I firmly believe Riesling's a wine that's made in the vineyard. As soon as you always divide opinion when you start going down the natural arguments. I won't open up that can of worms. But I as soon as you start playing with skin content and all that sort of stuff, I think you're trying to make up for something that's not inherently there in the vineyard.
Just with regards to Clare Valley in general, because Australia was growing Riesling for a long time before New Zealand. New Zealand didn't really start planting until the 1970s, I think, and it was probably at that time your biggest planted white grape in Australia, and then Chardonnay kind of took over. Why do you think the Clare Valley really became this epicenter of Riesling in Australia, do you think?
Because it grows well there.
Do you think it's found its kind of like its signature style and flavour and taste?
Well, it does. I think because largely what Mark said before, it's warm days and cool nights. So we're getting ripeness of fruit flavour and preserving acidity in good years, and the wines are just fresh. And for everything that you see in a glass of Riesling, which is a delicate fresh wine, you sort of expect that. You've got the white gloves of a billiard table attendant when you're managing it in the vineyard and the winery. But it really is, the vines are really quite robust. It's quite astonishing. I mean, I've been doing it for our own brand since 2009. And it really, like, in these hot summers, we'll get runs of 35 to 40 degree days. It still cools off at night, but you think they'll be the first to turn up their leaves, but they're not. It's really quite a hardy plant. So I think in the hot, dry days of that continental climate, it just seems to suit the vine. And with regards to your statistics around the planting of Riesling, there was a lot of mislabeling going on. I mean, we in the Hunter, we had the Semillon planted. It was called Hunter River Riesling, and all the Cruchon Riesling. The reality is, I don't think a lot of people knew what was what. So
there was a lot of Trebbiano that was labelled as Riesling for many, many years. Yes, yeah. Definitely. Sorry for dropping out before, guys.
No, you're right. So I think that is why. I think with Clare, it's consistency. It's that balance of warm and cool. So you find great wines out of Great Southern and Franklin River in Western Australia and Canberra, but the reality is it's tough. It's more expensive to grow grapes in those regions. So I mean, you can buy the best Watervale Riesling for $30.
And it's something we found in New Zealand over here is that we have such a range of Rieslings. Well, in the world, there's so many different styles of Rieslings, but in New Zealand, they tend to be from dry to off dry, but nothing like what you've got in Australia with this really low sugar content and bright limey acidity is why we personally chose to bring this Atlas back again for a second year and give it to the New Zealand clients because it's just so refreshing and very expressive of the Clare itself.
And T, I'll definitely, first of all, I completely agree with you, but I would also add, I mean, there really aren't too many expressions outside of Australia of Riesling like that in the world. I mean, Riesling traditionally comes from Germany, of course, but this is, I mean, this style of Riesling, that racy acid, bone dry, it's almost kind of carved its own path away from its German ancestry. And it's just so perfectly suited for the climate that we live in as well. So I think that's where it came from, but it kind of evolved separately, if you will, here in the Clare. And of course, that's now spread to other sections, as you just said, Adam, to Great Southern in Western Australia is another great example. Eden Valley, another perfect example. But I think it's just managed to eke its way through and find a perfect little home for what we need it to be here. Because if you'd only made, and this is me guessing, but if it only made off-dry, Spätlers and Auschles styles, like the German styles, if we were making styles like that here in Australia, I highly doubt that they would be selling well at all. We need that high acidity, bone dry finish to go with the kind of climate that we exist in here. So I'd be keen to hear any thoughts on that as well, to be honest.
I think ultimately it comes down to balance. Everyone can have their opinion and prefer styles, but if you're growing Riesling or any grape, in a climate where it can properly ripen, which we can do in Clare here, ultimately we're looking at wines with acids around 6 or 7, which can you can balance the palate with zero or minimal sugar. Where if you're in Germany and you're struggling to ripen fruit or ripening fruit very slowly in challenging conditions, then you're picking fruit with acids that might be 9, 10, 11, 12 or more. You need the sugar just to carry the acid. So I think a lot of questions about wine can be answered just with balance.
Yeah, I think that Clare Valley signature that it's got of that really dry, less than 1 gram residual sugar, real crisp, and it's become kind of iconic.
Oh, I agree. However, I'll tell you, it's a hell of a lot easier to sell it in Australia than it is overseas.
Do our best, mate.
Exactly right.
At least you guys like it.
That's fantastic. And Ali, question for you?
Yeah, Adam, and I know you'll probably have a strong opinion on this, being an Australian winemaker, particularly with this topic, but one of the characteristics that can come up, I'm sure a lot of people have spotted this before, is this kerosene, TDN character that can come up a lot in Riesling, and particularly can come up in the Clare and in Eden. And some people look at it as a terrible fault, others don't. What's your, just to, brief introduction on your thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think it's I'll preface what I'm about to say as I'm a winemaker, not a scientist. And again, looking at a wine in a glass, I think it's about balance. People will criticise, Syrahs from Clare for being minty. Again, that mint is almost regionally defining. So again, it's about balance. If you can see it in there in the background and it reminds you of that, it is Clare, then I think it's done its job. But obviously, if you're leading with that, then it's too much for some people. So with regards to that TDN character, I think it reminds me of the conversation. So I don't mind it, and I think as wines develop in the bottle, you start to see it a little bit more. I don't dislike it. As long as it's not
overbearing
and inhibiting any fruit expression whatsoever. But I don't think it's a fault. I think it's a character, and in that it lies in the spectrum.
Ironically enough, I think I know I've spoken with several customers in the past and recently as well, who are looking for that character. They see it as they want a Riesling that when it ages a little bit will get that kerosene petroleum note to it. Yeah. Just in exactly the same way that there are people who like eucalypt character in Coonawarra Cabernet, for example. Mm. It's like an easily noticeable defining character. So I think it's I've talked with many winemakers who consider it some form of a fault, potentially like a sunburn fault. But I think if it's like anything really, a lot of people say that too much Brettanomyces is a fault, but some people say that it's not at all, and it's as long as it's well balanced within the wine, then it'll bring something extra.
Yeah, I think as this screen says, and why it's such a wine lover's wine, is that there's this huge spectrum from very dry to very sweet. So, just wondering what you guys are thinking about it when you're tasting it in your glasses over there. Thoughts?
For me, or you're throwing that to the room?
Out to the room.
Out to the room, yeah. Any thoughts from anyone? Any feedback? Thumbs up. Drinking a few extra glasses. Nice. That's all right. Not a problem. So, with that, we might move on to our next wine, if we can, please. So, if everyone can grab their bottle of Atlas Shiraz and pour themselves a glass, if they haven't already, that'd be great. We're going to move on to our next slide, and I'm actually going to take us back to the 3D image. But first of all, I just wanted to point out how amazing the labels are that you have there, Adam. They're just absolutely incredible.
Thanks. I'd love to take credit for them, but we have a good design studio that we work with. It's actually a century-year-old, based on a century-year-old celestial map, hence the Atlas reference. But
right,
there you go.
Excellent. No, they're unmissable.
You wanted to just show the southern vineyard, like that different view you did yesterday, just to show that different topography, because I think that's quite important. Because, well, maybe it's not important, but I enjoyed it yesterday.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. No, it's a good way of. Give me 1 sec. I've just got to.
Didn't spend much time drinking that one.
I'm working without a mouse here, so I've got to do it with the trackpad.
No, if it's too hard, it's okay.
Should be. I've just got to figure out how to do it with the trackpad.
No, you're right. Don't worry about it. It's just a view which just shows that the different aspect and topography of the location of that vineyard. It sort of looks like it's quite flat there, but it's quite a steep west facing.
Yeah, I mean, you can quite clearly see just on the western side here. There's the top of the ridge just there. You can see a definitive ridge line there. Then it kind of goes down, and you see another ridge line come up on the other side here. So you can. Yeah, sorry, Adam. I'm not trying to do this on the trackpad.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But like I said, the result is much fewer daylight hours and later ripening and preservation of acidity in there.
Actually, hold on. I think I've got it. I'm just going to move this around. There we go.
While you're doing the math, one of the guys in the office.
Got it.
One of the guys in the office is asking how the labels changed in the last year, I think.
From the previous one. So I'll grab a bottle. Hang on.
Yeah. So while Adam's out, you can very, very clearly see that real slope, and it's kind of like a little bowl in the centre where this vineyard is. And there's not too many vineyards on the western side of it, which I find interesting. It's just kind of.
No, it's not. It's really just those vineyards you can see there.
What are you there, Adam? About 400 metres above sea level, 350, 400?
The Gully View vineyard's at about 450. So this would probably be, it'd be at least probably 450 down to 430.
Okay.
But that's, I mean, it's pretty hard to get your head around Clare as what we call a cool climate when it's 44 degrees. But it does cool off a lot at night. And the altitude is our saving grace in terms of producing these styles of wine.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it's just for me, when I've only been there once, and I was just blown away by how there's not that many regions that can be so diverse and can produce this bone dry style of Riesling, and then these rich minty Shiraz, and as well, we're not even talking about Cabernet, but I adore Clare Cabernet as well. I think it's a fantastically diverse region.
It is. It's just one of those places where you've got to spend some time and you've got to work out what's where because of it. If you just, because of Clare Valley Riesling's popularity in particular, you'll find that people that they'll start a brand, or they'll come to Clare looking for Riesling. We need a Riesling in a range. Let's go to Clare, and they just walk in and without any thought, they find a deal. They sort of increase the weighted district average price by 20% any given year, and then they end up turning out fairly ordinary wine because they just don't know the place. It's the sort of place where you sort of, and that's what I've learned. I thought I could do the same, I guess, but I live there, and it takes a while to get to know it.
How long have you guys been there, Adam?
We've been here since 2007. So we were in WA before that. We're from Adelaide originally. I was in WA. My wife was studying over there, and we moved back to Clare, and that's been it. That's the job.
All right, let's move on to the Shiraz now. So where would you like me to go first, mate? To Leesingham or to the White Hut?
Head up to White Hut.
Yeah, White Hut's an absolutely incredible looking vineyard, and it's what I love here is seeing the difference between the kind of forest side where we just were, then gully view is that kind of red, almost clay soils. Now here it's just a little bit more, and I'm actually going to go in a little bit more because you can see that it looks relatively green, but there's a lot of dry ground under here as well.
Yeah, it's a real sort of shaly mosaic of soil types. There's probably 3 or 4 different soil types within that block, but it's I guess the defining it's tough. It's tight ground. We do have imported water, which I don't think any of the vineyards out this side of town would probably survive without us being able to drip feed them. But the cropping levels at it's 2 tons an acre is a good year. It's tough. It's concentrated fruit. It can be one of the tough decisions is the picking decision, because you can't fix green, but at the same time, you want to make sure these wines are showing fruit first and foremost, and they can be easy to over extract with quite small berries. So the wine in front of you tends to come off of on that screen, the bottom left-hand corner there, which is the oldest plantings. Yeah, so there's that triangle, and then the block below that we've only planted last 2 years ago, so that will be coming into production next year. But we're looking, you're looking at vines that are 40 years old. They're bearing well.
Clare Valley.
They're going to do. Pretty clear, is it?
Hello? Is someone trying to say something, or is that just white noise?
Might be a bit of white noise there, mate.
Yeah, okay. So, and you'll see the block, the other unplanted block that was replanted last year. So we did pull out some Cabernet there because it was just it was old and not bearing, and we've replanted that to Shiraz, just on the other side of the dam there, on the top right hand side of the vineyard. So now it's 8 hectares of Shiraz. So in terms of the wine itself, we handpick all that older stuff in that corner. We include a small amount of whole bunches, try and preserve whole berries where we can, just to try and preserve and increase aromatic. Stylistically, I guess one of the wines that excited me as a younger person and as someone learning about wine with styles from Western Victoria, and I think places like Bess and Seppelts out there, I think they're styles that I like to emulate, and I think we're in a good place to do it. So the wines, like I said before, they are they're intense and powerful and muscular, but they're not big and overbearing. They still have really, really sort of defined structure, good line. You know, I have dumbed it down before and trying to sell Claire on one hand and Barossa in the other, and I said that Claire's like a gymnast, where the Barossa's a bit more like a go-go dancer. You know, it's just this kind of it's just different. They're both equally good, but just very, very different.
Something
I think
we'll see very quickly. Yeah.
I was going to say, that's the reason why we wanted to bring the Atlas into New Zealand again for the second year, is because it's so good, even though everyone just instantly thinks Barossa is Shiraz. But there's these regions just outside that have got their own nuances.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, you don't need to, I mean, we don't sell a lot of wine in New Zealand. We sell what we sell via you. But having a look around on the web and what's going on, you guys do punch above your weight in terms of your support for the Clare Valley. So thanks for that. That's great. It is easy to, I mean, I'll be honest, but being in the market, Clare is a tougher sell for most retailers and restaurateurs than Barossa. Barossa walks off a list, walks out of a shop. So you need people who are really passionate about a place and a style, and who want to differentiate themselves from that to support it. But I've always said good booze finds a home.
That's very, very true. But I just wanted to point out here, so we've got as I said, Adam was very generous in pointing out literally exactly where each of the places, the plots he sources from. I just wanted to point out, so we've got White Hut Vineyard, which is right up in the north, past Clare town proper, up near Stanley Flat, which is the really, really the warm section of the Clare. And then the other part is the Leasingham Vineyard, which is right down here in the south, kind of one of the southernmost areas. So it's quite amazing, and I imagine that's how we get that real that tighter line of acidity. You get that little, it's not minty, but it's like a kind of not quite white pepper like you get in New Zealand, but a real bright pepperiness in there. So yeah, it's beautiful.
It is. That said, there's none of that vineyard in there because we bought it last year. But I mean, the Leasingham Vineyard, if you want to zoom in there, it's a plot of ground which we're really, really quite excited about. You'll see. Okay, say that's fine. So you'll
Looks
see
a bit dry.
Yeah, well, it is. I've got no idea what time this is. I'm assuming this is post-harvest, given the amount of water in the dam and that sort of stuff. Do you want to just drag the vineyard icon towards the top of the screen? I'll just there's a bit of provenance, which is so the vineyard immediately to the south, just in there. Yep, that's what is known. Treasury bought that last year. That's what they call the Botanic Vineyard, and they've just released a wine off of that, which was I think it was a Clare Barossa blend, and they're selling it for stupid money. Although we're trying to sell it for stupid money, to $1,500 a bottle.
Jesus.
And the vineyard, again, at the bottom of behind the Botanic Vineyard, if you go again, with the old contours there, that's the old, and beyond, but that's the old Shobers Road Vineyard, which was part of the, the Leasingham Wine Company, part of Hardy's and Accolade, and it was actually it's the only vineyard from Clare to have ever won the Jimmy Watson. And so we have...
Just while we're talking about winning a couple of things, Adam, do you mind just mentioning some of the awesome accolades that Atlas has received in the last couple of years, especially from James Halliday and things like that?
Oh, look, to be honest, I mean, Halliday seems to consistently rate our wines, these single vineyard wines, around 95. I try not, when we don't really play the show circuit, so I'm not trying to devalue what we do, but I try not to necessarily seek that level of external validation in what we do. It just seems to be such a grab for points, so points and points and
But
price.
personally, the guys on the floor here think that it definitely speaks to the value of the wine when the wine is selling in New Zealand for about $40, $45, and it's a 5-star winery from Halliday, top 10 best new wineries back in 2013, I think.
Yeah.
And just consistently getting those good scores. You know, you guys are obviously doing something right.
Yeah, look,
so,
it's nice, you know, and we've actually started sending samples just recently to Hugh and Hook, just because we're probably big enough now that we need to, or should be being seen in those places. But you know, and I look at his scores, and he seems to rate things fairly more along the lines of a wine show, I guess, rather than James, which seems to be you know, a slightly different scale, I guess. And look, these wines all consistently get silvers, and I think that's a good result. You know, you're making wines that are, you know, consistently punching above your weight. Every now and again you jag a gold or a trophy, and that's all fantastic. But it's not why we do it, and we don't get too carried away when that sort of stuff happens, because, you know, to be honest, the shows are a bit of a lottery. We all know that. So that said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year with the show system and this bloody virus. So.
Yeah, that's going to be. We're going to have an interesting few show runs this year, aren't we?
Yeah, no.
A lot of people who rely on shows for their bread and butter are going to be. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting new world for us, definitely.
Yeah, but you know, again, I think it's nice to get people to look at what's in the glass. There's a lot of good wines that get unrewarded at wine shows, and a lot of average wines which seem to do quite well. If that's the game that you play, then you know, it's a bit of a numbers game. But we do it from time to time. We tend to focus more on the local show, because at least you're comparing, you know, with your peers, I guess. And you know, they're a bit of fun, but you know, I tend not to get too upset or too excited when things do or don't go your way.
So, Ali, you've actually just did a slight tangent here, but you've actually been judging for the last few days, haven't you?
Well, actually, that was what I was just gonna mention briefly. I'm actually starting tomorrow.
Oh, right.
So they're doing the Decanter World Wine Awards and the International Wine and Spirits Challenge, and they started Decanter a couple of days ago, and they started today, I think, with IWSC, but I'm up there tomorrow. And yeah, it's a very different feel to it. I've seen pictures of people going. It's all very distanced and quite sterile, but you know, they're still going ahead, which is good. So hopefully, I'm pretty sure in Australia they'll come up with some sort of decent socially distanced way of doing it. But it's yeah, it's a whole different world out there in every way.
Well, look, I mean, who knows how they'll do it, but potentially you could be tasting in different locations, and it'd be interesting to see the influence of place on perception when it's put into that kind of
Very true, yeah.
Put through that rigor, I guess.
It's very, very true.
There'll be no not as much going for cleansing hours after, I think.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
No,
maybe bring your own.
Yeah, I think bring your own. Yeah, spittoon, bring your own beer, all of those things. I'm sure people will.
That's awesome. So,
Any
Adam,
questions?
Yeah, let's open up the floor a little bit. If anyone's got any questions, if you don't want to take yourself off mute or you don't feel comfortable talking, obviously feel free to use the chat, as Mike has just done. Thank you, Mike. So Mike has said, absolutely delicious, so concentrated, lovely leathery type flavours, great acid and structure, long finish. That's pretty damn accurate.
Looking at that wine, I mean, it's you know, when I first look at it, I haven't looked at it for a while. When I first look at it, I see 2017. It was a cool year. It was a tough year. It was a wet year. We had to work pretty hard to get this in. You know, firstly to ripen it and then to get it in before it was too late. But it seems to have, you know, to come quite well. You know, it's quite elegant. It's got, you know, it's ripened well, good fruit, and you know, that oak. I'll be honest with you, I thought it. Going to bottle, it was pretty punchy, but it's integrated really well. So I'm pleased with that.
Yeah, and we've got another question from Elliot, who actually works with us in United Cellars New Zealand, and he's asked about your label.
Yeah.
So he's asked because it went from a relatively subdued black to a really colourful and I think quite beautiful label right now.
Yeah.
did you have a reason behind this? Like
Yeah, to be
purpose,
honest,
marketing?
that reeks. So can everyone see that, the old label? It's a bit.
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, the difference was it was timing. You know, we started. We're a young family. We started a wine brand off of our own vineyard, and we were rolling our life work and life savings into it. And we were really, I think that speaks of being quite conservative. We didn't want to get it wrong. We wanted to be quality. We probably weren't prepared to take the risks. And looking at it now, it's a bit tired. It's not as expressive as we'd like and as we think the wines are. And we've got the confidence in what we're doing now to have a bit of a play. It's quite simple. I guess it's become the new image has become the hero image, I guess, which is great. So that's why we've actually, we actually do a Shiraz in this light blue label, which sits at about the $25 mark, and that was developed after the black label. So we actually had the hero image, which everyone loved, and which was sitting beneath the black label just because the black label came first. So that's why we've sort of evolved the label to that. So which is based on that light blue label. So just a bit more foil, a bit more bling. But it's the same underlying brand image.
Yeah, a bit more expressive of your personalities potentially. Yeah. So,
yeah, no,
Elliot,
absolutely.
I hope that answers your question, mate. I hope you can pass that on to your customers. So Adam, thank you, mate. That was amazing. It was great to get your insight of your special little part of the world you live in.
Well, I hope it ticked the boxes because, like I was told, I'm not particularly funny or entertaining. So I hope everyone got what they wanted out of it.
That was definitely informative, mate, and it was good to get a little a picture of where you're from and a bit of the background, but also where these wines come from, where they're sourced from, and seeing those little images of where they are is really helpful. I think it's a lot. I think it's always great to see the land, to see the geography and the topography, and see what's around it, just to get an idea of what goes into the grapes, what's in the soil, and what's around it, and what then therefore becomes the wine. So I think it's really, really valuable. So thank you, mate. So
no, thank you. And look, I think it's testament to you guys too to going to this effort to try and showcase a producer which who is small, and going to the effort to actually try and show our place. It's a lot of people don't take that time, so it's much appreciated at this end.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Thanks for the support.
Thanks, mate. And now we are going to move on to our third wine. So if you could please grab a glass of the third Powell & Son Barossa Shiraz, and we will.
I might scoop, mate. I might scoop.
Of course, mate. Of course. We appreciate your time.
Speak soon. See ya.
Thanks, mate. Thanks. So we are now going to. So Alistair, T, and I are going to take this final wine we're going to be tasting. Now, this is, of course, a Barossa Shiraz. Now, I'm just going to give a little bit of a picture of the background of this producer, and then I might throw across to Ali, who's going to give us an idea of what he sees as Barossa in not only this wine, but I think within the wine world, because I think Barossa it's got quite an important place in the wine world. So, just to give you a brief background of this producer, Powell & Son. Started by David Powell. David Powell was the founder and winemaker of a very, very famous Barossa producer called Torbreck. Now, he was at Torbreck for many, many years. It was about 15 years. And Torbreck was bought out by another company, by an American company. And it was a bit of a public stoush. He kind of stormed out and started his own brand, started a smaller brand and his reasoning behind that was because he wanted to make something that he could give to his son, Callum. His son, Callum, is a very, very talented young winemaker as well. He's only 22, but he's already done more vintages around the world than most current winemakers today. He's classified as what we call a flying winemaker. So he does every vintage he does summer in the southern hemisphere and then summer in the northern hemisphere as well. So he's been in the Rhone for about 3 or 4 years now. He works at Jean-Louis Chave, a very, very well-established and very famous Rhone producer. And so Callum and David, they make these wines together. And it's a much, much, much smaller enterprise than the Torbreck business was. Torbreck was a much, much bigger name and a much higher production, obviously. But what Dave has done is if you ever meet him, if you ever meet him, you'll never forget him, that's for sure. He's a very memorable character, and this sounds like a joke, but it's not. He used to be a lumberjack in Scotland. That sounds like something someone's made up, but it's true. He was a lumberjack in Scotland. He is an enormous man, very, very broad and round, very, very strong. His handshake is like that of a bear. He's incredibly strong. And he has this presence that you think he's going to make these incredibly big, brash, loud wines. But the wine that you have in front of you, hopefully you can see this as well, that his wines always have a note of elegance to them, which you just don't think you're going to see in his wines, but you really, really get. He has fantastic relationships established with many of the oldest growers in the Barossa that he established partnerships with when he was with Torbreck, that he then took with him when he left Torbreck. So he has access to some fantastic fruit. However, this is a much, much, much smaller production, as I mentioned, and we're very, very grateful to be the only importers of this wine into New Zealand currently. So, yeah. So,
especially on that engine to that, that he's got access to such old vines. The Barossa in general has some of the oldest vines in the entire world, and that Dave has got access to some of those. It's just incredible, especially for the price point that this sits at.
Absolutely. So thank you, T. So I'm just going to throw across to Alistair now, just to get your idea or your thoughts on Barossa, just as a region, if you wouldn't mind, mate.
Yeah, I think there's several things. I mean, when people think about Australian Shiraz, I think that the first name that comes to mind is Barossa. You know, we know there's great Syrah Shiraz made all over Australia, but Barossa is really the heartland. And as T just said, it's got some of the oldest Shiraz vines in the world. I think they're probably back to, you might know exactly, Mark, 1870, 1880 maybe?
The oldest vines that are currently still alive in the Barossa were planted in 1849.
There you go, 1849. So I was even 25 years out with that. That's quite, it's quite astonishing. So obviously that means they haven't been affected by phylloxera in the region. And it's a very, I'd say it's quite a unique style in many ways and fairly different to other parts of Australia. It's very warm. You know, what you don't have quite as much here as we have looking in the Clare Valley, and you'll get in the Eden as well, is you don't get as much altitude, and it is a warmer area. There's still a difference between the day temperatures and the night temperatures, which is important, but they tend to be far more generous wines, as it says here. So, I mean, for me, descriptors of the Barossa style Shiraz would be mocha, coffee, chocolate. Is a denseness and a sleekness and a plushness to the wines. And because it is so warm there, you do get what they call phenolic ripeness, which gives great concentration to the grapes. So you get these rich textured, but they still manage to maintain these grippy tannins. They're not powdery, or as I would probably think of Clare as being these more powdery tannins. They're grippy but rounded. So they're seductive wines, I would say. And they have the ability to age a long time. And another factor is they're very often aged in American oak, which gives them quite a distinct flavour as well. I think crushed ant is a descriptor that's sometimes used in Australia, I think. And that's quite a distinctive. I've never smelled a crushed ant, but I know from being with my Australian friends what I think they smell like. And I think it's a benchmark area. I think it's probably, I know they've had problems with water there and drought and the like, but it's probably, the benchmark Australian style, and very different to what we're finding in New Zealand from Hawke's Bay, which is more of that white pepper, black pepper, slightly lighter style. This is certainly a full throttle hedonistic wine, but can age extremely well, which you might not expect it to age that well, given what I've said, that they're rich, powerful wines, but if stored well, they can age incredibly well. But no, certainly the benchmark for me of Australian Shiraz.
Thank you, Ali. That's fantastic, great insight. And if I could just put my little bookend on that as well, I just find it very, very, it's very indicative in that basically every single region in Australia grows Shiraz. Australia and Shiraz, they just kind of go together so well, and it's so ubiquitous throughout not only all the states in Australia, but almost every single region. There are very, very few exceptions that do not grow Shiraz. So to be the region that is known globally for Shiraz in a nation of Shiraz I think it's really testament to how important this grape variety is. This region is for the production of this.
And
grape.
it's not, you might know stats here. I believe it's not a big valley. It's only about 35 kilometers long. It's not particularly big.
It's really not. And I mean, if you're talking about, so this is an interesting little fact that I'm going to share with you guys. It sounds like base semantics, but it can be a little bit confusing. So you'll see here, there are actually three names in this maroon section. There's the Barossa Valley, which is split, and it's about 25 kilometers east to west. It's really, really not, you can drive across it very easily. A lot of people take bikes around it because it's a relatively flat, easy bike ride. Then you go up into a higher section, and that's the Eden Valley, which is much more hilly and mountainous. But the entire section together, so if you blend fruit from the Barossa Valley and the Eden Valley, you can call your wine Barossa. So that's just another, if you see something, if it says Barossa without saying Barossa Valley, that means that there is some Eden Valley fruit within that wine. So just a little bit of semantics in there it can be a little bit confusing, I know. So this one here that we're tasting is Barossa Valley. So it's from that small little strip of land. It is about half the size of the Clare Valley, which is where we were going before. So it's not very big, as you said, Ali, but one thing that I will point out about the Barossa is that when you go there, and I encourage you to come whenever it's possible, it is wholly and solely a wine region. You're driving through there and it is just field after field after field of grapevines. It's been established there for hundreds, almost 150 years. And it's just, that's the industry that's successful there. And that's what does really, really well there. So it's a really well-established region.
It's a hub, isn't it? Because I know that we've said that it's not the biggest region, and it's not, but a lot of wineries are based there, and a lot of grapes are bought in and vinified in Barossa. So it is, being a small region, as you say, it is a hub. It is purely a wine region with a lot of action going on. A fascinating region.
And again, slightly tangent to that, because Adelaide, out of that huge map you showed us before of how big Australia is and where just the wine's growing on this edge here, Adelaide's the biggest wine growing region out of the lot of them. Is that correct?
The Greater Adelaide region, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Greater Adelaide region, which I'll try and show this so it includes Adelaide Plains and all of the Adelaide Hills, McLaren Vale and the Fleury. So the Adelaide region is one of the largest producing areas, definitely. So I mean, South Australia as a whole, which is basically everything on this picture here, which includes obviously the Riverlands, which is a very, very volume heavy area. But this is, in good years, it's kind of 40 to 45% of Australia's annual production. And keep in mind, Australia is the 6th largest wine producing country on the planet. So 40% of that that's a lot of wine. There's multiple millions of bottles.
Yeah, but it's crazy. And the stuff that
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, but the Riverland is a voluminous area, isn't it, Mark? As you say. So what percentage would be coming from Riverland? You know.
Riverland would probably be of the total of South Australia. Would be a good percentage. It'd be probably upwards of 20%.
Yeah.
It's just because it's got a very it's got the Murray-Darling River in there, so it's a very there's a lot of water available, so they can just kind of make these not overly complex wines, I'll say.
Okay.
The other thing I was going to say with the Pale wines is he does do a Barossa Eden Valley combo, and then a more higher tier just Barossa and just Eden Valley that we are lucky enough to bring in as well, to just kind of see the different tiers, the different styles, and really stunning wines, really good wines.
Yeah, I have to just reiterate the point. I mean, he comes across as a really, and he loves a beer, and he smokes cigarettes, and he's a very, very big, loud man. You'll never, as I said, once you meet him, you'll never forget him. But there definitely is. He has such care for his wines. They're like his children. He gives so much care to each of these wines and each of these growers that he works with to make sure that the wines are looking as good as they possibly can, and that they're really expressing what he sees in the vineyard when he tastes them. That he's always said that that's the most important task of the winemaker, is to make sure that when you taste it in the vineyard and you fall in love with this fruit, that the person down the track, not just the person who tasted at a barrel, or the winemaker, or the person who's selling it in the bottle shop, or the restaurateur, but the customer 10, 15, 20 years later, they're going to still see a bit of that down the track. So I think it's a good, definitely a good way of looking at things, yeah.
And again, I know it's not all about scores and critics and things like that, but he got the accolade from Robert Parker saying David Powell is unquestionably one of the world's finest winemakers. And to have someone like that saying that about your work is it's stunning. So yeah, we're really proud to be working with Dave and the range in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great ones.
So guys, that pretty much wraps us up. Thank you so much for coming. We would love to hear any questions you might have. There's nothing on the chat that's outstanding I can see here, but if anyone's got any questions, feel free to, you can raise your hand within here, or you can just chat, or you can take yourselves off mute. I've made sure that everyone can take themselves off mute if they need to. But otherwise, we will be wrapping things up. Our next tasting is in 3 weeks, I think. No, 4 weeks. 4 weeks with Ridge Par, which will be fantastic. I believe we've got the winemaker coming. Is that right, mate?
Yeah, mate. We've got Lauren Swift coming to talk to us about a few of the wines in the region. That's for sure.
So, question here from Mike. Thank you, Mike. So where does this wine fit in the Powell level of wines? So this is Dave's introduction wine. So this is basically the wine. It's his largest production wine, and it's his least expensive wine. So this is the wine that basically is, it's the wine that he hangs his hat on, honestly, because if he's going to get you hooked, it's going to be with this wine. So this is his kind of introduction wine, is what I would like to call it, yeah.
Currently in New Zealand, we've only got the straight Barossa and the Barossa Eden Valley blend, but we do sometimes bring in the more top tier wines, yeah.
Yeah, so these top tier wines, they are very limited, obviously, but and they're quite expensive as well. So if you are interested in trying these wines, as I mentioned before, several of them are actually, they were made famous under another name, under the Torbreck name, and Dave's managed to maintain the relationship with those growers and keep the fruit going to him. So very interesting, I find. But yeah, let us know if you're interested in any of them. So otherwise, I think that's going to wrap us up. Unless I'm just cycling through everyone's screens here, seeing if looks like everyone's pretty happy with that. And we will hopefully, there's still plenty of tickets left for our next tasting with Bridge Par. So if anyone is interested in coming along, get in touch. If there's anything else you'd like from this evening, just let us know. We'll be in contact over the next few days. Otherwise, thank you so much to my team here. Thank you, Ali from London.
You're on mute, Ali.
He's on. That's right, mate. We will also say thank you to T. Thank you so much, mate.
Problem, guys. Thanks for coming.
And then I think, are you right now? Try it now, Ali.
Yes, now I can. For some reason, I think you blocked me.
I blocked you accidentally. I did it on purpose. No, I'm joking.
Pesky Englishman from Chippy. And no, great, thanks. Great to see you all, and thank you for joining. And yeah, great tasting, and great to see some Australian classics that are really different to the styles that you get in New Zealand. So hopefully it's been really informative and nice to see those different styles, and a great choice of wines as well, guys.
Beautiful. Thanks all. Thanks for coming. And just to let you all know, we'll be making a video of these of this presentation. We're putting that up on our website within the next few days. So if there's anything you missed, there's anything you want to come back to, we'll have that up online, and we can send you a copy if you need. Okay. Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening, everyone.